Welcome to Thursday, the 13th day of November, 2025. Your Day Weather Podcast brought to you by the Advocates Injury Attorneys. If you've been injured in an accident, don't face it alone. Get an experienced local Wyoming attorney on your side. Free consultations at wyomingadvocates.com or call 307-800-1952. You deserve an advocate. Well, changes are coming, but in slow motion. Slow motion changes here, especially the next 5 days or so, as we'll continue to have very mild and pleasant high-pressure dominated weather for most of the central and northern Rockies and the central and southern plains. But we do have this West Coast storm system that's moving in to the Pacific Northwest and into California. Those areas are set to get wet with rain, high elevation snow, and it's going to be a really nice shot of rain for the far western areas of the United States. Always can use it, so that'll be good. The system, though, does split, and we get that pick and roll little low pressure system that'll move across parts of Colorado and Wyoming into Nebraska late Sunday into Monday, and that is going to produce some weather. It's not going to be a big system, but it is going to kind of soften the defenses, so to speak, of this big high pressure pattern that we're in right now. So this is why the changes are in slow motion. We're going to kind of have to peck away at the high pressure ridge with these West Coast systems here initially. Now, the pattern is changing as we get into next week. There are other Pacific fronts coming in behind this one. So the overall trend, I wouldn't call it really cold, but it is going to be cooling down, and precipitation chances across the Intermountain West and part of the plains will go up next week with these systems coming through. Then something we'll talk about here at the end. A very rare stratospheric warming event is coming. It's setting up, and this is part of the picture in the longer term for the end of November into December. It does segue into some things we've talked about in earlier videos in terms of the weather changing towards the end of the month, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. Some cool looking clouds across the Bighorn Basin of Wyoming yesterday, and these mid and high level clouds really came in sheets and got a lot thicker yesterday. So that did put a damper on the viewing of the aurora last night. Now, we did have a good shot there over the Snowy Range Pass yesterday evening. So some of you may have seen it, but the polarity of the stream of energy coming off the sun was not quite as good as it was the night before. Nonetheless, hopefully, if you missed the first night, the second night you were able to see it. I forgot to throw this picture in yesterday of an awesome shot of the aurora the night before over the Basin Electric Power Plant in Wyoming. Satellite photo this morning shows a beautiful comma-shaped curl there off the coast of Northern California. There is our low coming on in. You can see the puffiness in the clouds here. So there's a lot of instability, good rain underneath these clouds, and a lot of instability, good pocket of cold air with this system. However, out in front of it, we have this veil of high pressure that'll continue to bring mild and dry conditions here with a mix of sun and high and mid-level clouds, and just really amazing, unseasonably warm November weather here for a little bit longer. And there it is. But we go into the weekend with the system splitting. That low goes down off the coast of California, brings more rain to southern Cal, parts of the Arizona and Nevada deserts as well, and that will spread showers into Utah. The northern branch is going to produce some precipitation up into Wyoming's northwest mountains up here, some showers with that first wave going in and breaking off and heading very quickly east. Here's your southern California moisture, really all of California, going to get a good rain, and then even into Las Vegas here, then pushing into parts of Arizona by Saturday, into Saturday night and into Sunday. With that one piece breaking off from Southern California, this here is coming in behind it from the Gulf of Alaska. You can see it's not nearly as big. It's a small little system, but it is going to produce snow in the mountains of Wyoming, far northern Colorado, and some rain and snow showers out on the plains late Sunday into Monday. But the way the system is tracking, and it's going underneath the high pressure ridge right here, it is not going to be able to maintain itself and become a strong system. But it may produce more weather than you'd expect it would as it comes across late Sunday into Monday, and then some cooler Pacific air, colder air from the North Pacific comes in. It's not the really cold Canadian air yet. that we're going to see coming in. But it is going to step our temperatures down, and that stair-stepping down with temperatures will continue. This is the second wave. So you can see this is for Sunday, Monday into Tuesday morning. So you can see as that low cuts across this area right here, we will get some snow in the ski areas of Colorado and southern Wyoming. Certainly Wyoming's western mountains, the bighorns here will do well. We'll get some rain and snow out here across the Dakotas and Montana. So finally going to get some weather coming on in and more snow for the Sierras. Then when we take a look at the snowfall forecast, basically from today through Tuesday morning, it's looking like this. Then going out further, the low that comes through Sunday and Monday gets kicked up northeast. We have this secondary system coming behind it, going into Utah here. And you can see the ridging in the eastern Pacific. So this is going to set up eastern Pacific troughing, ridging rather, ends up into western U.S., dips in the jet stream. We have this block that's forming the Greenland block up here. So this is going to bottle up. This blocking pattern right here is going to establish itself. And so what happens is, as systems come off the Pacific, instead of racing through, they kind of get bottled up, and you just basically have this part of the country here and North America more often than not having systems coming in and then digging further south instead of just moving on through, which has been the case here for the last several weeks. So we've got the Greenland block setting up, which bottles things up, and that also starts to consolidate very cold air masses here. And you can see all the blue up here. There's some really cold air up in this part of the world right up here. We'll show you that tomorrow up into portions of northeastern Asia and Siberia. So we're going to see these slow motion changes as we get into next week, and this is by next Friday. We may end up with a fairly robust low pressure system traveling in this area here mid to late next week. We'll just have to keep an eye on that. There's your blocking pattern here. So you're starting to notice more in the way of weather in the central and western United States next week. But we don't have that Canadian connection yet to really make it cold. But it's certainly going to be trending cooler. Now let's talk about the stratospheric sudden warming, the sudden stratospheric warming event. We call it an SSW. What I'm showing you here are the 10 millibar, or this is very, very high in the stratosphere. And when the stratosphere gets warmer, some of you may remember these events. When we have these warming events high in the stratosphere, we're talking 70, 80, 90, 100,000 feet above us, way, way, way up high, way above the troposphere. But when the stratosphere goes through these warming events, we have a situation in the higher latitudes where the expansion of air, because it is warmer air takes up more space. You have an expansion of the air masses way up high, which goes up and down vertically. So you have to think vertically in this map as well. The higher altitude of the stratosphere, because it's growing vertically, will push the colder air that's ringing these areas closer to the ground further south. So right around the 20th of November, see how the color changes right here? So right at the end, so we're talking about a week from today, we have this warm pocket right here, which is already a bit of a stratospheric warming event. And then it really grows and you see the colors change. So you displace the very cold air that's in the polar regions, and that this ring expands, and the opportunity for polar air to expand further southward really grows. Now, we get stratospheric warming events during the course of the winter. Some winters we have more and some we have less. They kind of come and go. We talked about something that I'll bring up here in a minute that does cause the jet stream, the polar vortex, to become weaker and expand that colder air further south. What's very, very interesting about this stratospheric warming event is that it's happening in the month of November. We usually see these in December and especially January and February. And that's one reason why you tend to get the bigger polar Arctic outbreaks in January and February when you put together stratospheric warming events together with it. We could argue that a little bit of this warmth that we're seeing right now was partly responsible for the Arctic outbreak in this part of the country here earlier this week. So when we put this stratospheric warming event and we look historically back to about as far as we can see where we knew what was going on in the stratosphere, we only have 3 events in November where this has happened before. This was sort of a weak November event in 2000, but we've got to go back pretty far to see these stratospheric warming events in November. So this is definitely something you don't see very often. And this tends to give us what we showed you with the QBO. This is a situation where you have no stratospheric warming events and the polar jet wants to stay further north like it's doing right now. But we just noticed this week this happened with the polar vortex shooting south and sending freezing temperatures all the way into Florida, breaking records that were 60 or 70 years old. So we are going to be entering into a more wavy polar vortex. So the long-range forecast for the northern hemisphere will be for pockets of colder air to intrude from the higher latitudes to the lower latitudes. Now this is starting to get out in the press. Some people are picking up on this. Thing you've got to remember, yes, it's a cold signal, and yes, it's going to lead to some big outbreaks of cold at the end of November and especially into December. Does that mean in your backyard you're going to have an Arctic outbreak? It doesn't. This Arctic outbreak, this expansion of cold air, doesn't mean it gets everybody. But the odds of Arctic air spilling southward and getting pushed further southward and having some real winter weather finally, well, the odds just go up. We just have to see where these cold outbreaks, like we're seeing here in this very idealized graphic, are going to go. So the stratospheric warming event is something that we're going to need to keep an eye on. And we talked about the QBO, the quasi-biennial oscillation going into an easterly phase. And here you go. Historically, the easterly QBO leads to weaker polar vortex and increased risk of sudden stratospheric warming events. Voila, here you go. So you see the pieces of the bigger puzzle could be coming into place, and you can see the regional impacts, at least historically, that what happens in these QBO and stratospheric warming events. More on this in the days ahead. Have yourself a good Thursday.